Training was born in 1990 in a poor riverside village, the fourth of 4 siblings in a farming family that worked the fields day and night but barely made enough to survive. His childhood was marked by afternoons wading through muddy rice paddies to catch crabs, by worn-out textbooks handed down from older students, and by meals of boiled vegetables and a few dried fish. To young Training, wealth seemed distant and unattainable, reserved only for people in the city. Each time he passed the red-tiled houses of the wealthier families in the village, he wondered when he would ever live like that, and if there was a way to escape the endless cycle of poverty. When he passed the university entrance exam and was admitted to an economics school in Hanoi, Training felt he had touched the first rung of a ladder that could change his life. As a student, he worked part-time jobs, waiting tables, handing out flyers, tutoring, to pay his tuition and living expenses. On campus, the gap between rich and poor was stark. His classmates drove shiny scooters and carried the latest iPhones, while he got by with a battered bicycle and a basic brick phone. At first, Training felt ashamed, but then he told himself, "If I wasn't given a head start, I'll just have to work twice as hard to make up for it." After graduation, Training landed an office job at a trading company with a starting salary of 8 million dong per month. It seemed decent at first, but he quickly realized the money vanished as soon as it arrived. Rent, food, transportation, family support, and small personal expenses left him with nothing to save. Month after month, he was trapped in the cycle of earn and spend, never moving forward. Lying awake at night, he imagined his life 10 years later, still stuck like his parents, working hard but never building wealth. One year-end party, his company rented a 5-star hotel. It was Training's first time in such a luxurious place, and watching wealthy guests walk confidently through the lobby filled him with awe and a pang of envy. A question echoed in his head, why are they rich while I'm not? They're just human beings too, not supermen. That moment ignited a fierce desire inside him. Whatever it took, he had to change his destiny. The turning point came when Training stumbled upon a book in a local shop, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Each page seemed to open his eyes. The poor work for money while the rich make money work for them. Poor and middle-class people often buy liabilities while the rich focus on accumulating assets. Hungry for more, he devoured The Richest Man in Babylon, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, and the rest of the Rich Dad series. Slowly, he realized wealth begins with mindset, not with the money you currently have. One late night, he sat down to write in his journal. He outlined his options. If he kept his office job, he'd be stuck in the same loop a decade later. If he only saved and left money in the bank, the interest would never make him rich. If he truly wanted to change, he had to learn how to build multiple streams of income, how to invest, and eventually how to run a business. On the page, in big bold letters, he wrote, "I will change. I will learn how to make money work for me." From that night forward, Training made a plan. To save at least 30% of his income each month, to invest in himself through books and courses, to seek side hustles to increase earnings, and to observe and model the thinking and actions of the wealthy. He knew the road ahead would be tough, filled with setbacks, losses, and discouragement. But he also knew that only discipline and the right mindset could pull him out of financial quicksand. And so, from a young man with nothing but determination, Training's journey toward financial freedom officially began. When Training first began reading books about wealth, something inside him shifted. For most of his life, he had believed that money was simply the product of hard work. The more hours he put in, the more he earned. Yet the pages of those books told him a different truth. Wealth was not about how many hours he worked, but about how effectively he could create, manage, and multiply value. At first, the ideas felt strange, even impossible. Make money work for you, the book insisted, and Training laughed bitterly to himself, wondering how money could ever work for him when he barely had enough to survive. But as he read further, he realized it was not about the amount of money he currently had, but about what he did with it. That realization began to transform the way he looked at the world. Walking through the city on his way to work, he no longer saw only people and buildings. He saw two worlds colliding. There were the office workers like him, tired faces rushing to catch buses, their lives tied to monthly paychecks. And then there were the shop owners, the entrepreneurs opening their stores, who seemed to own not just their time but their futures. Both groups worked hard, but only one had built something that could grow beyond their own labour. It dawned on him that his job, no matter how stable, could never make him truly free. It could give him security, but never wealth. That night he wrote in his journal that employees trade time for money, entrepreneurs build systems to generate money, and investors make their money work for them. If he wanted to be rich, he would need to evolve from being only an employee into becoming both an entrepreneur and an investor. The more training studied, the more he realized how little he actually knew. On campus, he had studied theories, but now he was trying to decode how money actually moved in the real world. He started to observe differently. When he passed billboards, he wondered who owned the advertising company. When he saw a crowded cafe, he thought about rent, profit margins, and marketing strategies. Even scrolling social media, he began following entrepreneurs and investors instead of wasting time on gossip. But knowledge was overwhelming, and often he felt small compared to the vast world of finance and business. So he made a promise to himself. No matter how tired, he would dedicate at least 1 hour every day to learning about money, through books, courses, or workshops. Of course, this shift did not come without resistance. His friends teased him, saying he was wasting time chasing fantasies instead of focusing on climbing the corporate ladder like everyone else. His parents, though supportive, were worried too. They wanted him to have a safe life, a steady job, a modest house, a family. They thought chasing wealth was risky, that he could lose everything. Their words shook him at times, and on lonely nights after working overtime he wondered if he was dreaming too big, if perhaps wealth really wasn't meant for people like him. But then he remembered that hotel lobby, the wealthy guests walking with such ease, and the determination burned again in his chest. If they could do it, so could he. He just needed to learn the rules of the game. One of the first lessons he applied was about habits. He realized wealth wasn't built from sudden luck, but from daily discipline. He began cutting unnecessary expenses, cooking instead of eating out, recording every single expense. At first it was tedious, but after a few months he saw patterns, leaks in his spending that could be fixed. Slowly, he redirected these small savings into a modest investment account. The amount was small, almost insignificant, but it was the first time he felt that money was no longer slipping away but beginning to work for him. Then came a moment that would mark him deeply. At a small networking event, Training met Mr. Hui, a seasoned entrepreneur who had built and sold several businesses. Nervously, Training approached him and asked for advice. To his surprise, the man was generous with his time. "Don't wait until you feel ready," Mr. Hui told him. "Start small. The world doesn't reward caution, it rewards those who create value. And remember, wealth isn't just about money. It's about freedom, choices, and the ability to live life on your terms." These words struck Training like a bolt of lightning. For weeks he turned them over in his mind. He realized he didn't need to wait for the perfect idea or a large sum of money. He could start with what he had, learn through mistakes, and grow gradually. From then on, he began to see himself differently. He was no longer just an underpaid office worker. He was an aspiring entrepreneur, an investor in training, a man on his way to wealth. His inner voice changed too. Instead of saying, "I can't afford this," he asked, "How can I afford this? How can I create value to earn it?" He stopped envying the wealthy and started studying them. The world around him had not changed, but his perspective had. And that, Training realized, was the true turning point of his journey. After the turning point in his mindset, Training stepped into a new phase of life, accumulation. He knew that before he could dream of building companies or investing heavily, he needed capital, skills, and experience. With this in mind, he began to approach his daily routine differently. At his office job, he no longer treated work as a burden, but as a training ground. Every project was an opportunity to learn how businesses operated, how managers made decisions, and how systems could be improved. He volunteered for extra tasks, stayed late to study company reports, and quietly observed how money flowed through the organization. The more he learned, the clearer it became. Businesses were not about working harder, but about building efficient systems that could scale. At the same time, Training pursued side hustles. He started freelancing online, first as a content writer and later as a digital marketer. He spent evenings after his office hours experimenting with Facebook ads, building small websites and running campaigns for local shops. In the beginning, he made mistakes, sometimes losing more money on ads than he earned, but each failure was a lesson. Slowly, his skills improved, and soon he was making an additional income that sometimes matched his monthly salary. Every extra dong he earned, he saved or reinvested, following his promise to put money to work instead of letting it slip away. His daily life became a cycle of relentless effort. Mornings at the office, evenings on freelance projects, nights reading books or watching online courses. There were times when exhaustion nearly broke him, when his body begged for rest, and when his friends went out for fun while he stayed home working. Yet inside him, there was a fire stronger than fatigue. He reminded himself that this was the price of freedom. Work like few are willing to now, so you can live like few can later, he whispered to himself whenever doubts crept in. Training also became obsessed with recording his progress. Every expense was logged, every new income stream tracked. He created spreadsheets to visualize his savings and investments. It was not the numbers themselves that mattered, but the discipline and the sense of momentum. For the first time in his life, he felt in control of money instead of being controlled by it. Over the next 2 years, his small investments began to grow. He started cautiously with stocks, learning how to read financial statements, how to identify strong companies, and how to manage risk. He made mistakes here too, sometimes buying into hype and losing money, but gradually he developed patience and a long-term view. His portfolio was still modest, but it gave him a new identity. He was not only an employee and a freelancer, but also an investor, however small. This phase of accumulation was not glamorous. There were no dramatic breakthroughs, no sudden wealth. It was a quiet grind, a steady discipline, 1,000 small choices made each day in favor of his future. But looking back, Training would later realize that these years were the foundation of everything. Without the discipline of saving, the courage to try side hustles, and the patience to learn from mistakes, he could never have built what was to come. By the end of the 5th year since he had first written in his journal about wanting change, Training had transformed his financial reality. He had tripled his income compared to his starting salary, built an emergency fund, accumulated a growing investment portfolio, and gained skills in marketing and business that would soon become his greatest assets. Most importantly, he had built confidence, the unshakable belief that wealth was not a distant dream reserved for others but a path he was already walking. The journey was far from over, but the boy who once envied the rich from afar had become a man steadily, quietly building his own fortune. After years of discipline and accumulation, Training felt it was time to take a leap into entrepreneurship. The idea had been growing inside him since the first time he watched small business owners open their shops while he rushed to catch the bus. Now, with a modest savings cushion, a growing skill set in marketing, and the confidence built from freelancing, he decided to test himself in the real market. His first venture was humble, an online store selling health and wellness products. He had noticed the growing trend toward fitness and self-care, and he believed that with his knowledge of digital marketing, he could carve out a niche. At first, excitement carried him forward, but soon reality hit hard. His first advertising campaigns barely broke even, and sometimes they lost money. Inventory piled up in his small rented room, and there were nights when he lay awake staring at boxes stacked against the wall, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. Yet instead of quitting, Training treated each problem as a lesson. When ads failed, he studied why. When customers complained, he listened carefully and adjusted. He realized business was not about chasing profit blindly, but about creating genuine value for people. Slowly, his strategies improved. He learned how to target the right audience, how to craft better product descriptions, how to build trust with customers. Within months, sales stabilized. Within a year, his store was generating consistent profit. It wasn't yet enough to make him rich, but it proved something vital. He could build something of his own. The experience changed him profoundly. Running a business was unlike freelancing or investing. It demanded leadership, vision, and the ability to make decisions under uncertainty. Training soon discovered that he could not do everything alone. To grow further, he needed help. He hired his first part-time assistant to manage customer messages, then a delivery partner, and eventually a small marketing team. At first, delegating felt uncomfortable. He feared losing control, feared others wouldn't do things as carefully as he did. But he quickly saw that by trusting and training others, he could multiply his results far, far beyond what he could achieve alone. Of course, entrepreneurship was not a straight line upward. There were setbacks, shipments delayed, sudden changes in platform algorithms that cut his traffic overnight, copycats who tried to mimic his products. Each crisis felt like a storm threatening to sink his fragile boat. But with every storm weathered, training grew tougher, wiser, more resilient. He began to understand that success in business was not about avoiding problems, but about adapting faster than others. As his business expanded, so did his vision. He reinvested profits not into luxury or comfort, but into growth, new product lines, better logistics, improved branding. He studied how successful companies built systems, and he applied those lessons, creating standard operating procedures, using software to track sales and inventory, and focusing on customer loyalty instead of one-time purchases. He no longer thought of himself merely as a shop owner. He was building an enterprise. By the third year of running his business, Training's online store had grown into a recognized brand in its niche. Revenues had multiplied, his team had expanded, and for the first time he felt the exhilarating taste of independence. He no longer depended on a paycheck. His business sustained him. The journey was grueling, filled with long nights and anxious mornings, but it gave him something far more valuable than money, the belief that he could shape his destiny with his own hands. Entrepreneurship had transformed Training. He had gone from a cautious office worker to a bold creator of value, from someone who once envied the wealthy to someone who now stood among them, building his own ladder step by step. The road ahead would still be long, with greater risks and larger opportunities, but he knew this for certain. He was no longer playing the game of survival. He was playing the game of wealth. As Training's business grew beyond his expectations, he realized that true wealth was not built on endless hard work, but on systems. In the early days, he had done everything himself, writing product descriptions, answering customer questions, managing deliveries, even packing boxes late into the night. But he knew that if he continued like this, he would eventually hit a ceiling. There were only 24 hours in a day, and his energy was finite. The wealthy people he admired did not succeed because they worked more hours. They succeeded because they built systems that worked without them. With this in mind, Training began to transform his business into something larger than himself. He started by documenting every process, how orders were handled, how customer complaints were resolved, how ads were tested and optimized. These became the standard operating procedures that new team members could follow. Then, he invested in software to automate repetitive tasks, inventory tracking, email marketing, customer reminders. Slowly, the weight on his shoulders lifted. He could step back from the daily grind and focus on strategy, innovation, and growth. Delegating was not easy at first. There was always the temptation to micromanage, but as he saw his team handle tasks effectively, his confidence grew. Training realized that leadership was not about doing everything, but about empowering others to perform at their best. With his business stabilized, he turned his attention to diversification. He had learned one of the greatest lessons in wealth building: never depend on a single stream of income. Markets could change, algorithms could shift, competitors could emerge overnight. To safeguard his future, he began investing in other assets. His first major move was real estate. He bought a small apartment in the city, renovated it, and rented it out. The monthly rental income was modest, but it was stable and predictable, unlike the ups and downs of online business. Later, he purchased a second property, and before long, real estate became a reliable pillar of his wealth. At the same time, he deepened his investments in the stock market. Unlike his early, naive days of chasing trends, Training now approached investing with patience and discipline. He studied annual reports, focused on companies with strong fundamentals, and thought in decades rather than days. He no longer looked for quick wins. he looked for compounding growth. The stock portfolio became another engine, quietly working for him in the background. But training's hunger for growth did not stop there. He began to explore opportunities in startups, partnering with friends who had promising ideas but lacked capital. Some ventures failed, but a few showed real potential. By spreading his risk and betting on innovation, Training positioned himself not just as a businessman, but as an investor shaping the future. Perhaps the most transformative step, however, was building his personal brand. He started sharing his journey online, his struggles, his lessons, his small victories. People resonated with his honesty and persistence. Soon he was invited to speak at events, to mentor young entrepreneurs, and even to collaborate with larger companies. His name became associated with resilience and discipline, and his influence opened doors to opportunities he had never imagined. Looking back, Training marveled at how far he had come. From the boy who once counted every coin to survive, he had grown into a man whose money now worked tirelessly for him across multiple fields: business, real estate, stocks, and ventures. He had systems that freed his time, teams that shared his vision, and investments that gave him stability. More than the numbers in his accounts, it was the sense of security and freedom that mattered most. He no longer feared the future, for he had built a foundation strong enough to weather storms. And yet, deep down, he knew this was not the end. It was merely another stage in the journey. For Training, wealth was never just about accumulation. It was about creating a life of choice, freedom, and legacy. The systems he had built and the diversification he had pursued were not only for himself, but for the generations to come. Years passed, and Training's life began to reflect the very freedom he had once only dreamed about. No longer tied to a monthly paycheck or the constant grind of survival, he now woke up each day with choices. He could spend mornings reading, afternoons with his family, evenings brainstorming new projects, or he could take entire weeks off to travel the world. Money was no longer a source of stress, but a tool quietly flowing in from multiple streams. His thriving online business, rental properties, a disciplined stock portfolio, and equity in promising startups. Each engine of wealth had been carefully built, and together they gave him stability, abundance, and peace of mind. Financial freedom, Training realized, was not just about numbers in a bank account. It was about waking up without fear of bills, about knowing he could say no to things that didn't align with his values, and yes to opportunities that excited him. It was about being able to support his parents so they could rest after decades of toil, about giving his children the education and head start he had once only dreamed of, and about being able to help others without worrying about himself. This was the true meaning of wealth. Not luxury for its own sake, but freedom, options, and impact. In this new chapter of his life, Training began to focus on legacy. He remembered the boy he once was, the one staring at the red-tiled houses of wealthy families in his village, wondering if life could ever be different. Now he wanted to be the inspiration for others who were still asking that same question. He wrote openly about his journey, the failures and struggles as much as the victories, so that others could learn. He mentored young entrepreneurs, teaching them that success was not about luck, but about mindset, discipline, and relentless effort. He invested in education programs in his hometown, determined that no child there would ever have to give up their dreams simply because of poverty. The wealth he had built was no longer just his. It became a force for change, rippling outward into the lives of others. And though his accounts grew larger, what mattered most to him was the knowledge that he had broken the cycle of scarcity that had once defined his family. He had not only created financial freedom for himself, but he had planted the seeds for a new generation to rise. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Training would sit by the window of his home, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. He would think back to the night years ago when he had scribbled in his journal, "I will change. I will learn how to make money work for me." Back then, it had felt like nothing more than a fragile hope. Now it was his reality. He smiled, not with arrogance, but with gratitude, for the struggles that had shaped him, the lessons that had guided him, and the resilience that had carried him through. His journey had proven a truth that he now carried with him always. Wealth is not reserved for the lucky few. It is built by those who dare to think differently, act consistently, and never stop learning. And as training looked toward the future, he knew his story was no longer just about him. It was about everyone who dared to dream of freedom and chose to walk the long, disciplined path to achieve it. Remember, wealth is not reserved for the lucky few, but for anyone who dares to dream big, take action, and stay persistent. Don't fear small beginnings, for every step you take today builds the foundation of your freedom tomorrow. I wish you the strength, belief, and determination to soon reach the wealthy, free, and fulfilling life you truly deserve.